on playgrounds and fields around the world.
School children are learning to play by the rules. But for many children, the lack of funding for equipment and basic sport needs impede their ability to become athletes as champions. Sport gives them opportunities to define who they are, who they will become. How does sport and education coexist? What is the game plan? Should sport be part of the curriculum? If so,
What impact, if any, does compulsory athletics have on education? Sport and the arts both have value and a positive impact on children. Can we find the right balance between the two in our schools? We must teach the next generation about life. To confidently face the future, young adults need the right tools and the right goals for the journey. Opportunity is the gift of sport. It teaches confidence, commitment, and teamwork. It is our responsibility to ensure that all children are in the game.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Nick Going.
Right, you're all still with us, and we are now really morphing all these issues together, because so much of what we said about women in sport and the curriculum in schools, and building on again on what we did this morning about the government's role. So all these things are interconnected, and for the next 45 minutes we need to look at sport's place in the school's curriculum. And I want you still to be sending questions in, because it does work terribly well. I know a lot of you have been sitting there, but I want to be able to push these ideas and maybe come to 2 or 3 of you into the discussion. And as you can see, we've got 8 different perspectives on the panel. I should warn you, we also need a headset because Hu Bin is here from China, so make sure you've got a headset. There are already clear challenges, but I'd suggest to you that when it comes to sports place in the school curriculum, we've already identified earlier today that in many ways the position and the role of sport in the school's curriculum is becoming an even bigger challenge wherever you are in the world, not least because of what we're hearing about the way a lot of kids don't want to continue beyond 13, and also a way of motivating them when they prefer to be looking at their smartphones or doing other things in the evening, partly as we just heard there in the women's session as well. So underpinning the remarks is essentially, what is the goal for the sports place in the school curriculum? What should we be heading for? What should governments be heading for? What should schools be heading for? What should authorities be heading for, whether in the most developed countries or the developing countries as well? And remember what Lord Mandelson said, reporting back on what happened in the ministerial summit yesterday. It's about understanding the role of sport in making sure that the next generation can contribute to growth and economic well-being. And we heard it again in the last session as well. And Kelly Holmes as well, underscoring how to energize the next generation as well. And that came through and has come through really in all the sessions. I've got one question already filed to me while the last session was going on. Let's get more of them. How to balance the time spent on education and sport in school. How to deal in schools with the increased expenses of sport compared to other areas. Bear that in mind. That came from Miguel Seguera, who's here in the audience. But just so you know who's up here, I'd like each of them to explain what their role is in helping understand the role of sport in the school curriculum. Let's go to the middle, actually, to Johan. Where are you, Johan? Yes, please, here. Johan King. Yeah, let me come to you first.
Oh, wow.
Johan Koss, sorry.
Thanks. I thought I was so expected to be number 7 in
No, I'm just asking you give 20 seconds on what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the founder and of the Right to Play. And what we do is improve quality learning through play and sport included into the regular curriculum. Adding to the physical education side, we also use it into regular teaching, because we know that play-based participatory learning is actually extremely effective for improved academic performance, higher attendance rates where there's a high level of dropout, and particularly in strengthening girls' participation in school.
Derek Higgins.
Firstly, I want to thank Doha Goals Forum for having us here today. Team Up for Turnaround is a brand new initiative which is buoyed by the support of the U.S. federal government with the Department of Education and the White House. We're the ones here that are a little bit different from everybody else on the stage. Our goal is to turn around the education outcomes in the lowest performing schools in the United States. The 5 to 10% of the lowest performing schools is our focus, and turning around the dropout rate, increasing high school graduation, post-secondary matriculation through the power of the sports community.
Fred Eng.
I founded the National and International Alliance for Youth Sports, and the reason I founded the program was based on all of the negative things that I saw were happening to children throughout America through overzealous parents and coaches. And today we have 3,000 chapters throughout the U.S., and again, it's focused on bringing the positive that children can gain in sports.
Now we have a great family association between Bart and Nadia. You've seen Nadia earlier, but Bart, just explain to us what you're doing in Oklahoma, what your center's doing, and then Nadia can underscore that with the experience in Romania.
Yes, sir. My name is Bart Connor. Some people know me as a double Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics, but around the world, I'm most well known as the husband of Nadia Comaneci.
But what about education?
I tell people in our house we have 11 Olympic medals. Of course, 9 of them are hers. I'd like to tell you three quick points.
You're running an academy, though, aren't you?
Yes, we do. We have a gymnastic academy in Norman, Oklahoma, and several businesses related to gymnastics. But I'm a product of the public school systems in Chicago that gave me an opportunity to participate in sports. And I'd like to talk about how I think that should be mandatory and pushed by the government.
In a moment, Nadia.
Together with Bart, we have the Gymnastic Academy in Oklahoma. I also have a foundation in Romania. It's called Mini-Me, where we offer opportunities to underserved kids to play sports. And together with Katarina and over 40 other legends in sports, we travel and do projects for Laureate Sport for Good Foundation.
Now, Hubin, just tell us what you're doing. We still all remember you climbing up in 2008 in the bird's nest to light the flame, the triple Paralympic champion in high jump from China. But what are you doing now?
Hello, I'm Ho Bing from China. After retiring in 2008, I have been giving speeches all over the world, and almost 200 every year to students, universities, and disabled people and their enterprises. By giving speeches, I can spread the Olympic spirits and to everybody. And I launched a charity project named Stand Up to Fit Prosthetics for disabled children all over the world.
Bonsoir.
I am the CEO of the French leading media group in sports, L'Équipe, editing newspapers, magazines, sites, websites, mobile sites, and also a free TV.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. We've got a bit of feedback there. Thank you. Right. The aim is then, what is the goal of sport in the school curriculum? And that's where I want to get to. I've given them a maximum of 3 minutes, so many of you can come back if possible. I'd like Johan to start, please. Oh, Justin, I'm terribly sorry, but we saw you earlier, so I beg your pardon. My mistake.
You transmitted back to this morning, weren't you? You thought we were still there. Well, as many in the room, I'm sure, heard this morning, Sainsbury's have a lot of involvement in sport, but specifically to the subject of schools, we fund a program called Active Kids, which is a collection scheme we have with our customers, which allows them to collect vouchers which are redeemable for sporting equipment in schools. We've redeemed over £135 million worth of vouchers in the last 9 years. In fact, over the last 9 years, we've put more sports equipment into schools in the United Kingdom than the government has. And it's had a huge impact on participation in grass-level sport in schools. And as I said earlier, part of what we've learned from that involvement, which really started as a calories in, calories out involvement, encouraging young people to have a healthy and balanced lifestyle, is the power that sport has also to grow them as young people, to prepare them for the world of work.
Great, Justin. My apologies. Thank you very much indeed. Let me tell you the kind of things you're already raising, all of the challenging issues about stress, how sport can be implemented in more stressful school atmospheres. Bear this in mind, please, panelists. Should there be a limit to the amount of sports in the school curriculum as it reaches a point where instead of boosting academic performance, it's actually disrupting it? And how can we set the limit in sport curriculum, in the sport school curriculum, between the fun and the rules of life? We'll come back to some of those, but those are the kind of things already on the mind of the delegates here. Let me go to Johan, I think, if I can, Johan, because I'd like to ask you where you see the challenge, particularly keeping the next generation motivated.
Well, I think there's a number of challenges in relation to this subject. One being the schools are under tremendous pressure for academic performance, meaning every school now should be performing better and better, and it's easy to cut out the kind of non-important subjects, meaning art and sport. The second part is the sport hasn't followed, understood necessarily, because we are focusing on the elitism in sport, and it's everything wants to see the best. And then that's an exclusive people get kicked out of the system. And that means that the school system doesn't really like that structure, so they want participants, and we have to kind of come up with a different reward system. The third thing is that physical education has always been seen as the lower ranking priority in the schools. And I think a solution to that is to create physical activity in the other subjects and have a more general understanding of how to create physical activity. The fourth, I think, is generally physical literacy, meaning ability to move your body is not existing anymore. It's not really a priority of people. We have so many ways of entertainment and activities in general. So these challenges are very critical to overcome, and we have to create solutions in the school system and outside the school system to overcome these challenges. I'm not saying, obviously, the fifth challenge is the children's motivation themselves. I mean, there is an addiction, for instance, in the games, online games and computer games and those type of things, which is hard to overcome as a motivating factor. Though, if you actually get children active and they are playing, they love it more than anything.
Let me just press you on what we were talking about before we came on. This contrast between sporting excellence and participation and what you described as the square versus the triangle. Quickly.
Well, I think, in sport, any type of sport structure is a very triangle system like this, and it pushes people out of the system. So that means that if you're not good enough, you're not selected for a team, you obviously are, you're not good, you get out of it, and that's a large reason why people stop participating in sport. We had to kind of create more of a square system with different rewards structures for people participating, meaning that you capture the people who drops out of the sports system into a more of a participatory action learning structure, where the selection based on your sports skill is not the only way to select you for participating and having fun in a team.
That's very helping clarifying the dilemma. Derek, let's go to you next, please.
I think when we think about participation in sport from an early point in time and how even kids consume media, for example, everything is focused on ultimate performance. And this goes back to Johan's comments in terms of what drives folks to perform at a higher level and through that triangle structure where they drop off. I think it's essential to teach young people as they're participating in sports at a young age that there are benefits lifelong in participating in sport that go beyond actual performance-based competition, which may end in high school or in college for many. Not that many people, as we know, go on to championship or professional level.
Is there anything more you want to add at this stage?
Yes, I mean, from my seat, are we hearing me? From my seat, from Team Up for Turnaround, we're focused on. We talked about goals, Nick, right? And so our goal is we're looking at socioeconomic outcomes. I'll give you a few numbers. For the U.S. education space, roughly 50% of U.S. high school dropouts can be found in 15% of our high schools. So it's a very concentrated group that's churning out the large majority of our dropouts. 50%, roughly 50% of African American males drop out of high school. About half of those go to prison. Others end up on the streets or dead. We are looking specifically to, in a very specific metrics-based programming model, look to change those types of numbers. That's just a sliver of the numbers that we're looking at. But I'm just giving an example because we only have a little bit of time. But metrics-based programming in schools that's not necessarily focused on sports participation, but education that's all buoyed by the sports community. When we look at on a market-by-market basis in the United States, our sports brands are the #1 brand in each particular market. We're using the strength of those particular brands to come into our schools and change outcomes.
Thank you. Let's move on with Fred now, because I should remind people you wrote a book, Why Johnny Hates Sport. That was 10 years ago. Does Johnny still hate sport? And you're very insistent about needing to meet standards.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is important, when I came here last year, I asked myself, where is this plane going? And today I found out where the plane was going, and I was particularly pleased with the fact that the #1 initiative was to build facilities for children to participate. However, that comes with a caveat. I'll give you an example. In the U.S., we have 80,000 facilities for children to play sports. And on those fields, children play sports, but yet I heard Richard Audius talk yesterday with astonishment that 75% of girls drop out. We've known those figures for the last 15 to 20 years. That's what happens to children in sports. So on these facilities, what we have developed in our organization are standards for usage. Why do we need those? Because what we do in America is that we give these facilities to parents who have no training whatsoever about children in sports. Their #1 focus is winning the championship. So what we have is on one side where we would hope educationally children learn the values of sports, of perseverance and abiding by rules and discipline, all the things that we athletes have learned. But on the other side is the reality of that picture, that children are learning violence, they're learning to cheat and win at all costs, they're learning the negative things that we need to abandon in sports. The only way that will happen is what happened is we brought 60 of America's leading experts to design the guidelines for usage of these facilities. And I urge the Qatar people and the people that are going to put these initiatives together, do not give the facilities to people unless they follow the guidelines and standards for use. Because when they violate those standards, they should never be able to have sport programs for children again.
Thanks, Fred. Let's go to Hu Bin for the perspective from China about where this needs to be positioned in school. And you were telling me yesterday that a large number of children do actually have to run 1,200 meters regularly as part of school curriculum.
I think that sport plays a most important role in school curriculum because children can get good physical strength, passion, and learn the spirits of teamwork from sports. And that forms their habitual habit for sport. I myself benefit a lot from compulsory curriculum because I was trained to become a Paralympic champion. The second is that I think sports should be compulsory in school curriculum. In China, some students in some schools will have to run for 1,200 meters every morning, which is, I think, is a good habit to encourage them into good habits. From schools to societies. As for my experience in the community groups, I took part in the Gobi Desert Challenge, in which we have to finish hiking for 120 kilometers within 4 days. And children, of course, the love was deepened between parents and children, but also the abilities of the children have greatly enhanced.
Shishi, thank you very much. I tell you, I'm getting a lot of points here to raise, so keep your remarks as thin as you can while still making your substantive points. Let me go to Bart and Nadia, if I can, not least to make that comparison between what you're doing in Oklahoma and what you're seeing in Romania, a member of the European Union and the largest and richest country in the world. Just make those comparisons, can you, both of you? Bart first.
Well, we've had a gymnastic academy for almost 30 years now. And when people know that Nadia and I run a gymnastic academy, they assume that it is for elite athletes training for the Olympics. We have 1,300 students, and I'm pretty sure that very few of them, or none, will ever make the national team. But as we've heard for the last 2 days, we all understand the benefits of sports, and we understand it's an opportunity that we should provide for the children. I like to tell people in the United States that there are 3,000 gymnastics clubs and 5 million children doing gymnastics. 5 million, and only 5 children make the Olympic team from 5 million. So if that were the only important goal, then almost everyone is going to fail. And I'll never forget when we opened our academy, we had an Olympic coach from Romania standing in the doorway, and he noticed 1,000 students participating, and he said, you know, you have many students, but no gymnasts. Because his perspective was the only reason to do it was if you were on a trajectory to make it the Olympic team. We see the benefits of sports, and we try to provide that for children of all abilities, with and without intellectual disabilities, with and without Olympic potential.
The comparison with Romania, you're going there every couple of months, Nadia.
Well, many years ago, we had physical education in school, so I grew up with that, all the generation, my generation. As Bart said, if we compare, I think that in Romania we have now probably 200 gymnasts compared to 5 million that there are in the United States. And we are missing that huge base of kids playing sports. That disappeared through the years, and we are trying to reconnect and see what we can do about that.
Thank you. Okay, Francois, please. There's one interesting point made from the floor. I have to say many of you are sending it to us anonymously. Should we be asking about activity in the curriculum as opposed to sport? Bear that in mind, please.
Well, the first thing is that keep in mind I'm coming from a country where there's been always a struggle between school and sports, because mainly elites consider and still consider for part of them that sports was a secondary or a third issue. I think that there's been 3 elements in terms of program for school, if you want. A, grow the personality. B, the academic. And C, now growing health preoccupation, health concern. So we have been always in a tension at school between, on one hand, academic, and on the other hand, sports. And this has been a source of tension and fight, sometimes to the non-benefit of the children. And most of the time, academic won this battle because we didn't choose priority, or we choose the priority to put it on academics and not on sports. Therefore, sports was a kind of an alternative. What is very interesting is that sports regain a very big role in personality development, where the people are out of school or where they are in a failure. And sports plays there a very, very big role, an increasing role, with sometimes a lot of difficulties because they have limited means. The new paradigm is health. And as you said, suddenly it's not only a question of develop personality, but it's also protection that health is secured, and we take care of it. Therefore, I think this angle is a source of hope, because schools suddenly see that the sport is certainly compulsory to prevent what we see now, which is across the world of obesity, etc. So I guess what we lost, the battle we lost between academics and personality development can be reversed through the health issue, which is now a concern for all governments.
Thank you, Francois. And Justin, building on what you were saying this morning, particularly about the government's role, and just refreshing the question we want answered in the next 18, 20 minutes, what is the goal? What should be the goal now for the position of sport in a school's curriculum?
Well, I think to build on what Francois just said, and in fact the question that you had from the floor, I think you have to recognise that education lies right at the centre of political orthodoxy, and that changes over time. Most education is state funded. We have this slightly odd thing in the UK where what we call public schools are actually private schools, paid for directly by parents, but most people go to the state system across the world. And sport, for its own sake, isn't in that orthodoxy today, and I don't think it will be in the foreseeable future. The state's view of sport is that it funds it through sporting bodies, football through the FA, athletics, and it's like through the various Olympic federations. So we have to shift the conversation to activity. Indeed, I talked about our program, which was Active Kids. We had tried it 3 or 4 years before, and we called it Sport for Kids, and it failed because parents' and teachers' view was that if kids were sporty, to use the phrase, they were already well taken care of. By shifting the emphasis to activity, which of course does include sport, but not necessarily formal sport organised in a competitive context, it engaged parents and teachers in a different way because absolutely they understand that it goes to health, and we all have a conversation to address amongst our young people today about the unhealthy lifestyles that many have. And it also addresses education. As I said earlier, young boys who are sporty, who have the opportunity to take part in activity, get better educational outcomes. I know for myself, my own experience of sport at school is I would have been, I mean, I wasn't great academically, but had I not had the sporting outlet that my school provided, I'd have been a disaster because I would have been unmanageable in class if it wasn't for the fact that I was doing a lot of sport to tire me out. And I think that's true of a lot of young people today. And you can keep them in school. I've seen examples in the UK of breakfast clubs. And that gets particularly young men to come to school in the first place because they want to take part in the activity before school and then pay attention in class. So I think we have to shift the conversation to activity and shift it to educational and health outcomes.
Right, I'd like to invite you in the last 15 minutes or so to pick up on any of these issues. We're going to have to do it pretty quick fire, but I want you to know I'm asking questions which you have filed, and therefore it's not from me, it's from you. Many of them don't have names, but there are several of them talking about physical activity increasing brain performance. Why should school curricula decrease physical education and increase academic courses when they know these scientific facts? Fred.
Well, you know, I think it's important to understand what is physical education. I'm a physical educator, and I can tell you in the U.S., aside from the fact that physical education across the board hardly exists. If we count it a half a day a week or an hour a week, what it is glorified recess. And building on what he just said, my question is when we look at the academic focus today, why do we not look and say that information academically, if it can't be transmitted, it's worthless? If we don't teach children through sport to be social, the psychological benefits, the emotional benefits of sports, how can they be whole human beings? And physical education should be focused not on trying to throw a ball out while the PE teacher sits in a room reading a magazine. What it should be is teaching children the value of their physical self and what it means to the rest of their lives. We haven't done that.
Anyone else want to jump in? A very important point of principle, Bart.
Yes, I'd like to say something about that because I agree with these gentlemen here. These are some of the brightest minds in the world on this problem. Here's one concrete solution that I've seen that was offered by a corporate entity in the United States that happens to be self-insured. It's an energy company in Oklahoma City. I was talking to their CEO, and I said, how do you incentivize good health behavior? And he said, well, for one, we have a wellness center on our facility. If you attend the wellness center once a week, your admission cost is $30 a month. If you go 3 times a week, your admission is free. Now here's a corporate solution, because for them it's a bottom line issue, but it's also a cultural and a messaging issue. That they're saying, we value your health and your wellness, that if you will commit to it, we will subsidize it as a corporate entity. I think governments could do the same. As Wilfred Lemke said, don't let anybody tell you the money's not there. It just needs to be channeled in the right directions. And I believe we all have interesting solutions here, but we have to press for concrete solutions, and I don't think we can say that we can accept anything less from governments.
Anyone else want to come in on this particular point? Justin?
Well, the thing I'd add is that head teachers in schools and teachers will respond to the messages that are sent by government very quickly, actually, even to the point that it can be counterproductive. We have a debate in the UK at the moment about head teachers giving children permission to leave school during term time to go on holiday. The consequence of that is schools are now banning all term time leave. I have a nephew who's trying to be a professional sportsman, and his school won't approve his leave to go to his training for that reason. But actually, on a nod and a wink, the head teacher said to him, but of course we know you're going to go, we're just not going to give you permission. So you can see very specific examples of where the message is sent by the money and the instructions from central government. And we have to encourage central government to send messages that will lead to the right behaviour on this. Because if you actually have the ability for schools to get better outcomes for the whole school, they'll follow it. If you take disability as a great example, the vast majority of disabled young people are taught in mainstream education in the UK today. The vast majority with special education needs likewise. What changed that virtually overnight was what are called statements of special educational physical needs. A child with that takes money to the school. Guess what? Schools now want kids with special educational needs and statements in the mix because it brings more money to the school. So those kids get to choose the right school for themselves, or at least their parents do, because the money follows that statement. These changes can be very quick if central government send the right messages with money backing it up.
Derek, would you mind just holding for one moment? A lot of you are asking questions which are on your mind about the balance in the time and the money being spent on education and sport in school. How to balance the time spent on education and sport. That from Miguel Seguera right at the beginning. How to deal with schools' increased expenses in sport compared to other areas. And Matilda Oy, should there be a limit to the amount of sports in the school curriculum as it reaches a point where instead of boosting academic performance, it is actually disrupting it? Now, do you accept that? And maybe, Hubin, you can also answer this as well. Should there be a limit to the amount of sports? But all of you. Johan, given what you were saying right at the beginning.
Well, I think this is an interesting view. Actually, all studies show the more active the individuals are, the better academic performance they do. So it's actually a correlation in the opposite direction. But to the exception of the absolutely top elite, who then obviously don't have the amount of time to be studying enough. But way, way, way up. So we're talking about 0.001% of the group is elite athletes who is just really not getting the performance, academic performance. But actually they catch up much later in life in other elements because of life skills from this top sport experience. But I think what Justin was saying is about the activities. I think we had to really work with the educators about having physical activities in the school setting with learning outcomes, because you can actually create games where they're physical activities. They can learn what they're supposed to learn in other subjects, like everything from math to language to literacy, and these things can actually be improved. And we have seen in our studies through right-to-play programming, where we have now over 1 million children in activity using play as a learning methodology. We've seen that academic performance in kids go from average 40% to 90% in national testing. We see dropout rates go from 50% dropouts to 3–4% dropouts in schools where this is integrated. And I think, you know, these type of things has to be seen by government, and it has to be brought out in large-scale programs.
Derek and Fred, this issue of should there be limits to sport? Derek, I cut you off a moment ago.
No,
could I just go to Derek, Fred, because I cut him off a moment ago.
I hesitate to say there should be limits. Obviously, we need to be smart about the time allocation that's given to any particular programming, whether or not it's sport or academic. But with that, one of the things that I've heard from a few different folks is about incentives. And I think that's a very important point. Whether or not we're talking about education specifically or we're talking about sport, it's providing the appropriate incentives. When we see an increase in incentive, that incentive drives specific outcomes. We talked about the participation model in this triangle before. If kids saw a greater outcome for themselves down the road performance-wise, they would continue to participate. We see a drop-off. Same thing on the academic side. We think if we bring them in, we create the appropriate incentives as well as give them a vision for opportunities of the future, of their future in sports and beyond sports in life, that increases outcomes.
And should there be grades as well, do you think?
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Johan?
I have to say that motivation does not come from long-term outcome. Understanding long-term outcomes will never change behavior. That's proven multiple times through social studies. So I think you have to create a motivation in the instant where the participation. So the participation comes, when the child participates, they feel good about themselves and they have fun in the participation. If that happens and they have a learning outcome from that, that is the motivation. If you're teaching a child that they're going to be healthy 30 years from now, it's not going to increase activity. So I'm sorry, Derek, I hope we can come to a conclusion that bring a program, you have to bring fun and you have to kind of instant rewards to the child. And that's not fun money. It's about participation.
Well,
it's about feeling good about themselves.
I'll speak just in a strictly academic sense. I've got a statistic for you that shows that if an 8th grade child that determines a career path that they're interested in pursuing that requires a 4-year college degree in 8th grade, move that forward, they then have an 86% graduation rate from college. That's motivation, that's incentive, that proves outcome.
Can I go to Fred and then Hubin on this idea there should be limits to sport in school?
No, there shouldn't be limits for sports in school. As a matter of fact, I'm a product of where they made it compulsory that when you went to school, you had to participate in a sport. What happened to me is I had no idea as a freshman in high school, but I knew I had to choose a sport. So I chose wrestling, and I ended up making the All-American team. I would never have done that. I would probably never been in a sport. But one quick point I want to mention about the 73% of dropout rate of children in sports by the age of 13. The study that was done at Michigan State and our organization found out from the participants the #1 reason that the kids said that they quit sports because of the pressures of parents and coaches. So when we look at sports and we begin to say, here's a need and a value of it, why do we not stop and think, these are the people that are making the decisions to not have physical education, to not have sport programs in their communities. They were the ones that were cut from the teams. They were the ones that were made to sit on the bench. They are the ones that don't see values in it.
Hubin, the idea of limits to sport in school.
I think that children don't like to do PE. It's not because of themselves. It's because of their president, the society, and the adults that are pressuring them. Before in China, there are many kids who don't like to do PE education. But our distribution of the PE education is already over 10 million people. Adults, they will affect children, and children, they will affect their own children. So it'll become a circle. So I think that the change should come within from the adults, the people sitting down there.
schools which are stressed, and you come from a country which is still trying to develop. It's moving very fast. It's now in the European Union, your home country. But several questions here about how you get good sport in the curriculum of a country where money is stressed, resources are stressed, and overwhelmingly there's that sense of struggle.
Well, when I grew up and we had physical education in school, that was all supported by the government. So probably was the same in a lot of countries like you, Katerina. We didn't know otherwise. We were just doing what we had when we had the possibility to play sports because they were in schools. You just have to convince. That's why I'm going there all the time. And together with Ilya and Nastase, who is going to be here tomorrow, we talk about the importance of not only playing sports, but the importance of how do you direct, how do you explain to the government the importance of playing sports. And because of what we've done and what we have accomplished when we were young, it's a challenge for me too, and for us. So that's what I'm trying to go back and bring some examples from the States and how kids can be involved and how kids can have opportunities. And we are struggling in Romania because right now sport is not a priority.
Francois, on all these issues, I haven't forgotten you.
Back to your question about the limit of sports. I think the limit is when the children are getting bored. I think that I think too much sports kills the sport. So when you said the motivation is the instant motivation is very important for them. The worst can be that they have too much sports, they have too much pressure about sports at school, and then they suddenly, or little by little, they get away from it. So, you know, there is a balance I think we can find. And again, I think by changing the type of sports you can do, by putting very simple and playing, rather than doing sports, but playing sports, I think that makes people, the kids love sports, and therefore it's not an effort, it's a ramp up. But all that has to be balanced, otherwise you get a limit where people are over the top.
Art, and I want you to answer this last one because we're running out of time. There are several questions here about teachers, the challenges for teachers in this new environment of expectations from kids as much as anything else. How can we make sure teachers have the confidence and the skills to make school sport inclusive? All of you.
I think to echo some of these sentiments here, I think you know, when we look at sports participation, people know all the benefits, but we really have to force governments to say that this matters as a core education element. It's not just an extracurricular activity, but in fact, sports is fundamental to your development and your cognitive learning. I'll give you one quick example. In our gymnastics school, we offer to 110 students each week, children with autism, on the autism spectrum, a free chance to participate in movement education based on the principles of gymnastics. And we collaborate with special education teachers and adaptive PE teachers to offer this program for these children. We are hearing anecdotally amazing stories about how these kids are cognitively progressing because the movement is helping connect them to their special gifts. So if we continue the conversation that sports is separate from education, we will lose. We must continue the conversation to say that sports is a core piece of education, and then it'll be integrated in all the conversations related to education and health that every public official wants to support.
And all of you, your last contribution on teachers, because several questions, the last one just come in. Motivation is the key. Behind the motivation is the teacher on the field. Maybe the PE teachers should be trained and rethink their teaching methods in physical education. This issue about teachers, Derek, Fred, Justin, and Johan.
I'll start. I won't limit it to sports, but I think that within the full body of curriculum, and I agree with Bart, you know, wholeheartedly that that sports should be included in the conversation of overall education, not separate from that. But in that point in time, at the same way, I'll say that teachers need to be appropriately prepared in all areas and not specifically.
That's a weakness currently, is it? It's a weakness.
Yes, it is.
Fred.
Unfortunately, sport and physical education in school, as I mentioned before, is a disaster in the U.S. And the problem is we have a difficult time changing that. My daughter is a teacher in school, and when I mention physical education to her, it's like, oh, don't give me something else to do. And that's the attitude of the schools and the teachers in the schools today. They are overwhelmed in our country with academic excellence and forget about physical excellence.
Johan.
Well, I think that the teachers, you have to turn it upside down, that you have to make every teacher an activity-based teacher, which means they're all using a type of physical activity to teach their curriculum. And you turn it upside down. You don't look and you introduce physical ed in all aspects of all courses. And that is a very motivating way to teach other subjects. And then you have to upgrade the physical education component. There has to be an equal footing, as Bart mentioned, in the school system. And I think we had to re-look at this. Now, I so agree with Justin. We had to re-look at it. It's not the introduction of sport. It's about wellness, physical activity, life skill learning, and then other type of learning you can get from those activities. And that I think that from we coming from sport, we had to kind of learn the new language to talk to the schools and the educators and the ministries in a different way instead of introducing sport.
Anyone want to say anything quickly before Justin, quickly, do you want to say?
If I could just pick up on that point. I mean, I think particularly amongst what we in the UK call primary education, so the very youngest children in the school system, where we don't have specialist subject teaching and children tend to be taught for a large amount of school time in class with a teacher. Physical activity has dropped completely from the spectrum of what those teachers participate in. And I think it needs to get back that early because the habits start young. And combining this with one of the earlier sessions, the role of corporations, this is something where I think corporations can have a role. We do in Sainsbury's. One of the legacy programs we've decided to invest in from the Paralympic Games is something we call Active Kids for All. It's a program with the British Paralympic Association training teachers to incorporate disabled children in mainstream physical activity in school, for the simple reason that mostly those children are excluded out of fear, not knowing what to do. And we've found the reception that we've received within the education system to be fantastic. And actually corporations in the education system is quite a troublesome thing to educators. So if you can find a route in, which we have with that, then you can make a difference as a corporation too.
And I have to say, Justin, there were several questions here about the role of the private contributions, but I thought we might end up going down a long track there, which could end up with us exceeding our time limit, which we've already done. Look, thank you very much indeed. I hope we've got through about 20 questions which you've sent, which shows the value of this system, because I can get a sense of what's on your mind and put it to the panel. Let me leave you with one issue, which is it's key to ensure young people become passionate about sport, to ensure they continue in sport outside school. We leave the question unanswered, though. How do we create that passion? Let's hope we get an answer by the end of the conference. But can I thank the panel for their contributions to the role of sport in the curriculum. Thank you very much indeed.